All right, buddy. Welcome to another edition of the Leadership Blend with your host Ricardo Rice and my co-host
Simone Sherry.
All right, so I know you guys saw the flyer, but Mr. Winters had an emergency, so we're just here with one of our favorites, Mrs. Maya Dillard Smith. Welcome back, my dear.
Thank you guys for having me back. I'm excited to join you again.
I think she's trying to vie for regular because every time she comes in, we be having like this amazing flow, and it's rare. No diss to all the other guests. We love you guys, but we talk real hard politics. Maya don't have no problem getting her hands dirty and saying what she got to say. But we got a lot to get into today, so I'm going to pass it on to Simone. So, Simone, what's on the rundown?
So it's the final day of early voting. So we're going to talk about early voting. We're going to talk about the election. We're going to go over the ballot and do something very educational and let everybody know what to expect, especially with the referendums and the constitutional amendment. I think that's important.
Yep.
So we'll talk about the ballot. We'll also talk about the presidential races and the polls and what states may matter and which states may not and why. And we'll get into a little bit of that as well. We've both voted already, so we'll talk about a voting experience, I hope, and then ask Ricardo a little bit about what he plans to do on Tuesday.
Why is it always got to be me? Why is it always got to be me?
It's okay to wait till the day of, but there's also some data around that and why people choose to or don't.
I just figured since all of y'all and y'all mamas decided to do early voting, if I wait the day of, all of y'all should have voted. The only people I stand in line with probably a bunch of Republicans who probably going to do like I do, just wait the day of.
No, because what's happened
Right.
is that first early voting day was really big, and every other day
Oh, it went
has
down.
been smatters
Really?
everywhere.
It hasn't been as unbearable, for sure. The first day was ridiculous, which is why I didn't go the first
Yeah.
day.
Okay, so I'm slightly confused. Okay, so this is going to lead me to something else, but I'm not going to get too very long. I'm slightly confused because I'm used to voting in Cobb. I'm now living in DeKalb. I'm not used to. So even my experience at a DMV today,
Different.
5 hours, bro, for DMV. I'm used to going in Cobb and maybe waiting 20 minutes.
Yeah.
5 hours? Like this is what we do here? So I wasn't really sure with
Yeah.
early voting. Do I go to the place that's on when I go look up my status?
No, you
Or
can
just go anywhere?
in the county
Oh, okay.
during early voting, but day of election, you have to go to your designated
precinct.
Oh, okay.
press,
So I
polling
could have
place.
voted there while I was at Thursday.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fine.
And
I won't
sometimes
talk about
the further ones are better. But yeah, we'll get into that. Let's start with really quick though with the tropical storm.
Yes.
So Zeta made landfall in North Georgia. It made landfall on Wednesday, and it came through Louisiana, 110-mile-per-hour winds. By the time it got to Atlanta, they were around 55 miles an hour, and it peaked at over 90 miles an hour in the immediate metro Atlanta area. There were 3 deaths, unfortunately, because of that tropical storm. Gwinnett County police said that 2 people died after a tree fell on a house. That was on the 500 block. There was also a fire crew that spent about 6 hours trying to get a man out of his 3rd-floor bedroom after a tree came crashing in. And in Cobb County, there are still, I think, 1,000 people who do not have power, which is why I brought that up.
It was
You were
creepy.
without for a while. I was without for a
It
while.
was creepy. Like I drove through and I was like, I could live here because there's no street lights. I was like, oh, there are powers out in this whole community. I'm like, this is kind of scary. Like some of these subdivisions.
People drive like
I'm in
fools
South
without
Fulton,
streetlights.
and there were 250 trees down.
Jeez.
Campbellton Road was blocked. Enon was blocked, and these are 2-lane ways where there are. South Fulton's the fastest growing city in Georgia, so there are developments. I went to a Starbucks that normally takes me 15 minutes yesterday, just because we needed internet, we needed coffee, we needed Wi-Fi. I have children. I mean, work. All those various things. Starbucks on Cascade was wild. McDonald's was wild. Chick-fil-A was wild yesterday.
That's true.
And then we got home late last night hoping the power was on. It was not. It was black everywhere. And so this morning we got power back. Cable is back on. Internet is not. It was dangerous. The garbage collection, which normally happens Thursday in our neighborhood, happened at 6:30 this morning. It was the only light we had as the truck came through the neighborhood, which worried me because there's no lights. So what is this truck doing? And in the development, the streets are narrow. So you hit a corner going too fast. And even yesterday at major intersections, the lights were out.
Yes.
There was no one there to manage traffic. People were gunning it on
Why?
turns.
Can we just really quickly? Can we explain why that happens? There are rules about what you do when the streetlights aren't working. I don't understand. I don't.
Okay, so this is my synopsis, especially with a 4-way intersection. So as long as nobody's on the opposite 2 sides trying to turn or anything, then the other 2 that are directly in front of each other should be okay to just kind of go. But you should still stop. Like I saw people like barreling it through, and then the other two people on the other
Wait
side
a
got
minute,
tired of
Ricardo.
waiting. I'm just saying. So the
rule
other two, what is the rule?
regardless of at an intersection where there are no lights, everybody stops.
It's a stop sign.
Every
Oh,
time.
yeah.
It's a stop sign because let's say there's turning traffic. If y'all just keep going, where's the turning traffic?
They
Well, I'm
just
saying they
sit
got to
there and
stop
sit
at some
there.
point so that the other two can go.
It's
but
one at a time. Stop.
Yeah.
Stop.
you know, you live in Atlanta.
But
I mean,
listen,
we live in
for the
Atlanta.
longest
Like,
time I have been on this, and I will be. I swear to God, before I die, Lord, I will write the policy myself that permanently bids all yield left turning lanes because there are not enough people in the state of Georgia, the whole state. I love this state. Not enough people who understand how they operate.
Yeah.
And those left turning lanes, they got to be the number one source of accidents because
Sure.
people don't respect them.
Mm-hmm.
If it's green and it's a green solid, they think, oh, I can just go.
Mm-hmm.
And there's just too many near death experiences that we witness all the time. And I know those people were in trouble with the street lights being out
You're
yesterday.
absolutely right.
Well, I guess my
Absolutely
question was, how did you? Because I went down some roads and there was some intersections. There were police. Others not so much. I'm like, so how do we choose where we're going to put the police to do these intersections? Because the one that you're not at, there's probably about to be 5 accidents.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
how do we choose where they going?
I don't know.
I'm kind of curious.
I
But
saw
later
them
on, I
leave
find out.
as the sun rose, and I didn't want them to because that wasn't enough. I
Yeah.
said it wasn't just
Yep.
the darkness; it was
Yep.
just the lack of street lights.
Agreed.
But no, I will take 3 rights to avoid making one left if I have to yield because I cannot possibly put myself under that sort of
gather
pressure.
this teenager is here with me today. She chaperoned me.
Okay.
She's learning to drive.
Oh.
So these are the experience. Teaching your kids to drive is like relearning how crazy drivers are. Because you got to teach your kids
Oh,
to
yeah.
be defensive.
Right.
And Georgia's a place you absolutely have to be defensive. It's incredibly litigious.
Yeah.
100%.
This insurance is off the hook.
Ugh.
I'm over it, quite frankly.
Agreed.
I think that's
Agreed
what
and
made me
amen.
look into the insurance commissioner. I was like, I didn't realize that was a thing, and I was like, wait a minute, are you in charge of this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, so
But I
so
digress.
it was a mess, and I just pray everybody stays safe as they humanly
Absolutely.
possibly can. COVID cases are also up, so we've got a new rise in COVID cases. More
Not
great news
shocking.
for Friday.
How about I say, I'm not surprised.
90,000 daily new cases, or more than 1 case per second, creating increasing uncertainty about who will prevail in swing states. So the original idea about this was they were tracking these cases rising in states where voting was going on the earliest, and the uptick was coming just right in line with all those early voting states. And now it kind of seems like it's more like nationally spreading again. So Georgia has
Which was to be
upticked.
expected,
Mhm, mhm.
just because there was always an anticipated fall resurgence. The numbers have gone
That's
up
true.
around Europe. And so this is not unique to voting. Let me
exactly.
be real clear.
That's
So I made that
This was
correlation.
already anticipated, and it is going to be complicated with flu and allergies,
Yeah.
which are
Right.
soon to ramp up as well, which is the heavy push on flu vaccinations. I've
Mhm.
only had one ever. I'm not really
I
a
haven't
big
done one.
fan.
I'm not.
Yeah,
about
we had a
to.
whole
Yeah.
episode about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
Very
not.
needed.
You're not gonna make me sick to make me immune. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
that's
a
There's
no
something
for
about
me.
that.
The
I
CDC
can't.
just got their first patient that has both and is being treated for both right now. So they said they're sure there'll be more, but this is the first person they know has flu and has COVID. at the same
Isn't that
time.
lethal almost?
No,
I don't
they're
know.
different strands.
Oh, okay.
So the flu and COVID kind of originate from a similar viral strain, and that's why you have flu A, influenza A, B, C, D, E, F, G. You've got COVID 1 through 19. I'm sure we'll get 20 pretty soon, and they're just mutations. Every time that we do a vaccine, we have to do another one because there's another strand of these viruses that mutate themselves based on the vaccinations. Now, I'm not an anti-vaxxer, but I do think we have to have holistic conversations about all of it because the vaccines do lead in some instances to the mutations that lead to stronger. This is what's been ramping up with the flu. We've gotten more deadly strands of the flu over the last decade. So this isn't new, and they aren't lethal necessarily, but they certainly have to be treated. It's why in the early stages of COVID-19 testing, most of the doctors were. Is that a fly on me or something? Yeah, I felt it, and I felt very Pence-like. Thank you.
That's an attack.
We can take a picture of this fly and give him some credit
Please.
to that fly that Pence got. He got fame.
I'm not the stuff. Okay, please, no memes. No memes. But that said, early in the pandemic, doctors were ordering what are PCR. They are holistic screens of the actual swab that's taken that tests for 45 different viral things, right?
Jeez.
It just became incredibly expensive because where a COVID test may be about $125 to run. The PCPR will actually charge insurance $750. So there's just some interesting things there.
That'll be a fight I'm sure we're going to hear about that insurance is not going to want to cover. I'm sure that's a fight we'll hear about soon enough.
Yeah. I'm sure. So, but it is to be said, if this is strain number 2 for sure, and that's officially the case, there is an increase in hospitalizations far more than there was around the last time. The New York Times is tracking this and running kind of different scenarios, which are kind of interesting. They're showing the states where hospitalizations are the worst. That's the record of where hospitalizations have been, and those are states like Montana and Indiana, Ohio, really actually the middle of the country for the most part, and then Alaska as well. So
I want to inject real quick because I got really excited.
Yeah.
So those and it's stupid, but those that watch Superstore on NBC with America Ferrera and all those, season 6 debuts tonight, and it's interesting because apparently she's leaving the show and it kind of centers around her. So I just got really excited when I saw that.
Are you kidding me? Are you kidding
I don't
me?
even know this show, so now I have to go check it out.
It's actually
Seriously.
it's kind of like The Office in a superstore in a Walmart. It's
I didn't
actually
know
really
you knew who
funny.
America Ferrera was. That's cool.
I love
her.
Ugly Betty. Like
I love
Wilhelmina.
Ugly
I didn't know
Betty.
that.
I
Like
loved
who
Ugly
doesn't
Betty.
like
Well, I saw
Mark?
her
loved
before
her.
that.
Like who doesn't?
I loved her.
But I digress. I'm sorry. I just had to throw that in because I got really
That's
excited when I
fine.
saw that.
Let's move on to the ballot because you need to be excited about the ballot. So let's just move on to what's going to be on the ballot. So today's the last day of early voting. Really quick, as far as turnout goes, turnout is record highs. As of yesterday, there was 3.1 million Georgians. That's about a third of the state, a little less than a third of the state, that has already voted either in person, early voting, or via absentee ballot. That's 86% higher than the general election was in 2016. This is according to the Secretary of State, so that's awesome. Most pollsters and operatives are saying conventionally that is largely the result of some of the Democratic polling that we're seeing that seems to be so positive, whether it's across the ticket or for the presidential race itself. A lot of folks are saying that Democrats do tend to vote early and usually take advantage of early voting and usually have taken advantage of absentee ballots, especially this year. I think that's been the case, and that's been pushed really heavily. At the same time, Republicans traditionally do not come out as hard until Election Day itself, and so a little bit earlier this week, Georgia Political Rewind was talking about this and saying that we may see that kind of shift come right on Election Day. And Election Day definitely had to be counted before Trump could be declared the winner in Georgia.
But one of the interesting dynamics about a lot of these numbers and a lot of the narrative around the numbers that I just question, it was anticipated record registration just given who has come of age. Period. Dot. Regardless of party affiliation, and younger voters tend not to be partisan. That's just the reality of it.
I've always heard that they were Democratic or always lean Democratic or liberal or progressive.
And
Liberal,
I think
guess,
that's
technically.
part of the incorrect narrative because I'm surrounded by millennials and young people, and when I tell you they got receipts and will light these Democratic elected officials up on records and lying in ways that I've not seen on Black Twitter, they don't play.
Oh, Black Twitter is
this
true.
notion that they're Democratic, I'm like, they may not be a traditional Republican, but to assume that they traditional Democrats, they're more like me, which is like, come on with the
Well, I was going to say,
foolery
maybe
and
are they
chivalry.
just non-political in general, just less
I don't
likely
know
to
that they're-
participate?
I wouldn't even go that far. I think that they are motivated to participate when inspired, right? I think this is the problem with the Democrats, is that their whole narrative is get Trump out. And I'm saying, well, what you gonna do for me? Because just getting them out's not enough. It's just simply not enough. And for many of the young people, it's not enough. I saw a commentary by a political strategist here in the state who cautioned people in the state that this presumption that because of the traditional numbers and turnout and who they are, all that changed after 2016. So this assumption that what was pre-2016 applies today, Trump blew all that stuff.
Literally,
no rules
literally,
to this thing, right?
literally.
So what this strategist was saying is Democrats ought not get comfortable that this increase in turnout is actually Democratic because there's not technically a way you can determine who's turned out and who hasn't yet with the crosstabs of the numbers that are being provided, right? So it would be a mistake to assume that because turnout is high, it's disproportionately Democratic is what a lot of folks are saying, right? I don't have a good pulse. Honestly, I don't have a good pulse. What I do believe, though, is I don't make the assumption that because turnout is high that it's largely Democratic.
Yeah, I
But
think that's fair.
That's what I said earlier. I was like,
Yeah.
people may be turning out, but who are they voting for? Like
Exactly.
that becomes a question.
Yeah.
Oh, Houston,
Yeah.
we cannot automatically assume that all of them voted for
We
Biden
can't.
and all
We
that
can't.
stuff. Like
the only
it's,
polls, all we can do is kind of track what those poll results exactly
Sure.
say, and that's
Sure.
essentially. However, The ones that I like the most, like Rasmussen's poll, I've always followed Rasmussen's poll, and then public policy polling we were talking about before we started. They're newer, but they have a really big body of a database that they use, and so they're only tracking the results of the ballots that have already come in because they're counting them all the time, and especially in Florida, they're counting them sometimes more than once a day in each county. And there is a huge Democratic turnout. There's a much preference in a lot of these states. In Georgia, there is. In Florida, there is.
But how can you
that
tell
can
in Georgia
change.
because Georgia doesn't count votes until the actual day?
So
how do you know? I'm just
So
curious.
no, I hear you. So the polling. Let me pull one of these polls exactly for example, because PPP is the one that we talked about most recently. They took a survey of 2,500 people that were based out of 3 or 4 counties who have already voted.
See,
so that's what they have to do is just to go with the self-reporting. However, when those numbers don't line up with what we actually have in terms of the number of ballots, I think it makes a lot of sense. But when they do line up, then I think it's easy to take a little bit more seriously. And I'm somebody who responds to those types of things.
Yes, we
I don't
know.
think that you.
I know. You're a polling nerd.
Because see, this is the thing.
Polling nerd.
I'm a statistician, right? I think they're crap, right? This is what I try to explain to people. When you say, this is what the numbers look like because you extrapolated from a survey of 2,500 people in 2020 when the reliability of these surveys, because y'all don't ever call me.
I mean, you can't ever bank
on
it. Ain't coming.
Exactly.
Look, and at this stage.
But you haven't been getting texts. You haven't been getting lit up with texts and phone calls.
Yeah, but most of them are Democrats. Like somebody texted me, it's like, hey, so I forgot where they were from. Hey, so we can depend on you to vote for Biden and Kamala. Sure.
Okay.
Somebody else, when I was in South Carolina, because my area code is still 843 on my cell phone, they was like, oh, are you over? I know my number says 843. I don't reside in South Carolina. Oh, I'm sorry, we'll take you off the list. So they've been very diligent about this stuff. But, me and Maya was talking about this before we got here. The issue that we're running into now is I don't feel like with this two-party system, either one of them, as it pertains to black folks, because that's what I am, I don't think that either party has me covered. I know. I had to admit that today. I'm black. Everybody's surprised. I'm black. Yes, I'm black. So
that's a separate conversation.
Sitting in my blackness, I don't feel that either party has me covered.
Yeah.
So I found myself for the first time, especially in my generation, I'll be 41 tomorrow. In my generation, you had a party. You either Democrat or Republican. In my day, Democrats were black folks, so we voted Democratic. And being around millennials and seeing how they feel about it, I'm like, no, I don't have to stick to this here. Y'all are crap. Y'all have not given us a viable candidate. No, and I will say this because I can. No, I am not that impressed with Biden. The fact that he was Obama's wingman is not enough for me. Nostalgia does not work for me because we don't live in the same world. Biden did okay in his debates. Some of his policies are great, but I cannot say that I'm going to the poll happily to vote for Biden. No. Now, the likelihood of me voting for him.
Vote for Biden?
I don't want to get into that, but I probably will vote for Biden only because I cannot fathom a world with Trump, who's given us.
I don't know why you can't fathom it.
Wait for it. He's given us a platinum plan for the black folks, and we're supposed to be excited about it. I'm sorry, it's real coonery for me. The fact that a sitting president came up with a platinum plan for me and my people. Personally, is disgusting, and I was offended.
Maya, I was going to say, can you please address because
it could be just the name.
This up before the
it might be the
and
name.
I was surprised at your level of disgust with it.
A platinum plan, no.
Because I guess of all of the things.
But Biden's plan is better.
Maybe it's the name.
Build back.
Maybe it's the name.
And Bloomberg had Greenwood.
I didn't even count him. I didn't even count him. I didn't count Bloomberg.
Hold on.
That was a joke.
Hold on.
On the plans. I'm so sick of y'all's plans. Biden, you've been there for 47 years. You ain't had a black plan till now. What the hell you been doing?
Well, now, in fairness, up until now, black folks really got unified, started tearing up some stuff, and they recognize we better say something or they're going to really tear up some more stuff.
Wait. We just got unified?
I'm just saying.
we was unified and tearing stuff up back in the 60s.
I know.
And that's what I'm saying.
But I'm saying like the younger people actually got on one page and actually really did, started tweeting and posting.
Contemplate this. If you take a picture from today's times and you juxtapose it to the 60s, ain't nothing different. And ain't nothing changed. The reason we had the Black Panther Party for self-defense was because of police brutality 50 years ago. So if Biden been there for 47 years, I need to ask, how you part of the solution? Because I consider you part of the problem. And that ain't about Trump, because I think Trump can be objectionable. Absolutely. I'm just sick of everybody's plan because I don't think nobody got a plan. And what I think is everybody presents a plan to get us fired up like somebody gonna do something for us. And I'm like, but what you do for me lately? Because I ain't seen, honestly, when you take an assessment of Obama's 8-year term, I still have to ask, what did you do for black people?
Don't make me go there.
Okay.
Well,
Don't make me go there.
Because here's the thing. I don't want to extend the benefit of the doubt to nobody that looks like me because all skin folk ain't kinfolk. I'm treating everybody the same, 2020 beyond. Assessment, policy, how did it affect me and mine? What's the impact? And it's a yay or nay based on that. It ain't about the demographics for me in that same regard, because it's a lot of us, particularly here in Georgia, that look like everybody in this room.
Facts.
That ain't about the business of everybody in this room.
Facts.
So I'm not going to hold you higher and say you did better because you look like me when the other... it's a no for me.
But the big problem with that, though, is that, and that's a very popular sentiment amongst people who have very different socioeconomic backgrounds.
Yep.
And they cannot possibly all be the same if you look at every single thing that he was responsible for, whether it was economic stimulus, whether it was, even the environment, if that's what you care about, and his implementation of the FDA
Trump
regulations.
or Biden?
Obama's.
Okay, Obama.
And establishing those FDA rules in the same way that he did. Somebody's benefiting from Obamacare who did not have health care before.
Okay, but I'm not talking about that. I'm saying black people.
Yeah.
See, here's
but
the problem.
that's exactly my point, though, is that
Let me explain.
Black people, I think, need to be a lot more specific about what policies they think impact black people, because if we were the most uninsured population and something like affordable care, which was the biggest move that we've ever made towards universal health care, was implemented, it disproportionately did improve the lives of black people. But if we're saying that, well, that wasn't black colored and black specific, then I really don't know what we're talking about other than reparations.
Let me clarify, because these are narratives that are wholly problematic for me. I'm so sick of talking about disproportionality because it disenfranchises us. Okay, let me explain. We've been talking about disproportionality in everything for the last 20 years. But what it makes it seem is that we as black people are poor, downtrodden across the board on every indicator. And are we disproportionately impacted? Absolutely. But you know what? In absolute numbers, it's a whole lot more white folks that are in worse conditions. And so unless we're going to have honest conversation that then allow black folk and white folk to see that we all in the same predicament economically across all these indicators, because the same people who are impacted by the lack of health care, the lack of Medicaid expansion in Georgia is disproportionately black, but in absolute numbers, it impacts way more white people.
But who wants to win the who's the worst off contest? That's not a contest I want to win.
No, but isn't it, right? Because we're doing a worse off right now. I'm
just talking about what's black specific.
I'm going to get there. Are we talking about the two worst candidates, right? People are deciding between the two...
The lesser of two evils.
Right? So from a policy standpoint, what I'm saying is I'm not even saying that they are evils to be compared. I'm saying everybody in the same boat. The problem is the disproportionality narrative for me. Now let's talk black. Kamala got in a bit of trouble in the presidential election because of this, because she says, well, I'm going to do this policy and it's going to help everybody and by extension help black people. That's a whole no for me. To use Affordable Care Act as the example of the benefit to black people is a whole no for me, because everybody's impacted by unaffordable health care, et cetera, et cetera. Because we have worse health care, we maybe have been made better in general because of, and when I say better, it's just that you got some basic line of coverage that you didn't have before, right? The problem with that is everybody in this nation, women, immigrants, LGBT, have gotten their rights on the backs of black people, but black people have never fully benefited from the very policies that were designed for them. Affirmative action as a case in point. The largest beneficiaries of that is white women. That's not who that was intended for.
That's true.
Right? So I'm very clear about black policy agenda, not in the exclusion of everybody, but to the benefit of everybody. Because in these United States, when you take care of black people, you take care of everybody. And it does not work in reverse. There's not a single law that has been passed, not even the Affordable Care Act, that when you take into account the benefit to black people, that there's really a true equity bump, right?
No, I understand.
It's just making people whole from the. I'm trying not to cuss, right? I'm trying to use.
I mean, you know what? Today,
what we are talking about though is I would say reparation, but at minimum, it's redistribution. It's a
Well,
reallocation.
no.
Of,
Well, I
Can
feel
I say
like.
it differently? Can I say it
Well, okay,
differently?
so let me say what I feel like you're saying is black folks have been enhanced as a byproduct, but not actually catered to in legislation.
so
That's
what
what I'm
saying.
hearing.
What kind of catering are we talking about? Are we talking about a buffet? Are we talking about crafts?
Well, okay,
What are we
so
talking about
this conversation reminds me of the conversation we just had last week with Sheldon when we were talking about diversity and inclusion. I was saying that we use this word diversity and it covers everybody. It doesn't just cover black folks. So that's where we're sitting at now. It's like, okay, well, no. This is cute, but like you said, everybody else has benefited from the word diversity. So when it's thrown into a room, because we were talking about Google, and Google was saying, oh, we're going to give our minority employees $2,500 toward their student loans. Well, when you looked at the statistics for Google, I think less than 4% of their employees are African American. So
true.
who the hell are you?
That is
Who
true.
the hell
That
are
is
you
true.
really
To that
covering?
point-
That is
so
true.
to that point, I've got friends this week alone in corporate America across the country having the same battle, right? After the George Floyd and everybody want to do something with Black Lives Matter and get their corporate social responsibility in play. Let me tell you what they do to black folks. Because black folks up and down my timeline and in my phone are pissed about it. So white America, listen, okay? When you have the expectation that your black employees are going to take on some added responsibility for the Diversity and Inclusion Council, you ain't promoted them, you ain't gave them no bump in a increase in pay. Well, all you did was add some more responsibilities for us to educate you about our blackness and what you need to do to get your structures in play.
Facts.
But if you do not dedicate the resources and then take the extra, some work off of people's plate to do the actual diversity and inclusion work, it's problematic. So my best friend is frustrated. She did not go after a diversity and inclusion job because her company, she felt needed her in procurement where she's a specialist, okay? They brought in somebody from the outside. Then they did a reorg and put a less qualified white woman over the group, and she had to go back shit on the CEO, CFO, CPO because they put her on the Diversity and Inclusion Council. And she says, I'm undervalued. You don't see my worth. You brought somebody in, but then they did this rollout where they promoted all these people, and I've been in rooms in political environments where they're doing the checkoff. I need a black woman, I need a black man, I need a Latino man, I need a white woman, I need a gay person, I need check. So what they did on the diversity thing, much like this minority, is they elevated maybe an LGBT Hispanic person, an Asian woman, or this and that, and the black, it might have been one black person that said so this was your outcome of the Black Lives Matter. George Floyd was diversity and inclusion for
Everybody.
when the company stats are less than 1% black people. And then the white CEOs and other, because it's not just white, it's other, because I also believe that white supremacy isn't just about white people. I find a lot of groups adopt white supremacist ideologies against black people, and we got to talk more openly about that. And so there was a lot of that where you had other diversity groups, whether they were women, whether they were other people of color, not black, or LGBT, but who were not in alignment with supporting their black employees, but who benefit from the minority designation. And that's why I do believe that we do need a black agenda. I just don't believe politicians are going to devise it for us. And quite frankly, I don't trust the Democratic establishment to do it for us either. We've got to do it for ourselves.
I understand that, yeah.
I think one of the problems is post 1960, we all over the place. I got mine, you got yours, we don't come together. I want the grant, you want the grant, I want the social media credit, I want the public credit. So we can't come together to do anything because we got all these factions. If you think about all these national nonprofits, the Urban League, the NAACP, the this one and the that one, man, if we could just have like a unified, but then again, we're also in an environment with the rise of the internet where we are our own individuals and so individualized that we do not do the group.
I do agree.
I agree.
In ways that I think we could benefit from our Jewish brethren and sisters who they might have diversity opinion in their group, but when they go out into this world, they got a unified something they're talking about, and it's to benefit the tribe.
Well, I mean, I drove through a Hispanic neighborhood the other day, and it was an apartment complex, and I was pretty sure the bulk of that complex was all Hispanic. And I was like, look at them, they're working, they're playing with each other, you know, they I'm just like,
but hold on a minute.
I'm not saying we don't. I'm just saying
No.
it was a nice thing to watch. I was like,
Of course it's nice to watch, but it's also a sign of the exact thing that we're always talking about in terms of neighborhood lines also becoming racial lines, and there being a lack of intermingling of neighborhoods and literally from street to street, different races living amongst each other are not interacting with one another. And the same, there are plenty of millennials who speak about a lot of what you're talking about, but who also have elevated that whole culture that we are not a monolith and we are individuals. And some of us do support trans rights, and some of us do support non-binary lifestyles, and some of us do believe that, you know, if there is respect for members who are intersectional, not just Black Americans, then that will be the upliftment of the entire race rather
What is
than just.
intersection?
But let me tell you,
But-
I don't adopt that ideology. Let me tell you.
I'm sure,
Let
but
me
I guess what
let
I'm
me
just
tell you what my ideology
I'm just
is.
saying
No,
that
because I have this debate
there's
with lots of
conflicting-
folks on the intersectional dynamics. I don't care what they are. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
I'm Black. I want a Black agenda. Is you Black? Is you Black? Now, if you Black and trans, that includes you too. But where I'm starting is on
Sure.
Black.
Sure.
If we start from the other intersectional, you lost me before you got, because let me tell you how I define myself. Black woman. Dot, 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 dot.
Yeah.
Right? Whatever labels come after, Black is first. So I'm asking, are you woman Black? Because I don't show up in the world woman Black. I show a Black woman, but
it's
what
more
I
the
want,
idea that when there are Black trans people who are being persecuted, or when there's opportunity for legislation, that the full support of all the affinity groups that we talked about, that may be there because they generally have multiple agendas, but not necessarily the Black community.
But see, and that's where I think it's easy to take one intersectional thing like that and make that the place of starting. It's not the place of starting, and the population is so small that it's not going to dominate for me the conversation of Blackness. But what I will say is this: they aren't included in my conversation about Blackness. They are not included. They are absolutely included. But do they lead for Black people? Fuck no. Excuse my French. Okay, it's too few. And that's not just for trans people, right? That would be, do I think that Afro-Latinos lead a Black discussion for Black people? Not for me in America. Now, are they included? Absolutely, right? For me, and this is where I make some distinctions about a Black agenda, the legacy of slavery and Jim Crow here has so impacted the descendants of American-born slaves that's the Blackness I'm talking about in America. I'm happy to have diasporic conversations. You want to talk about what they need to do in Europe and Brazil and all the rest of it? Yes. But here, I think the conversation, and this is what gets tricky for me about Obama and Kamala, right? Here would be a good conversation. Kamala, do you think you're entitled to reparations?
Oh.
And that answer is no. Because you are not the descendants of American-born slaves. And so, for me, this definition of Blackness is really about the legacy of slavery in this country.
Yeah.
And by extension, it's not to be exclusionary of anybody that falls under the umbrella of Blackness. Simply to say, for the masses, what do we need? And then how do we deal with the subgroups within us that we also need to care for?
Yeah.
So all I'm saying is,
the slave descendant piece, and it makes sense to me. And the slave descendant piece makes sense to me. I can't morally get behind the idea of like statistical significance of any subgroup. The subgroup itself, I get not being necessarily a primary focus for a conversation, but the statistical significance is going to bother me because as Black people, we're becoming increasingly statistically insignificant compared to other minorities.
Are we?
Yes, absolutely.
Why?
Because we've gone from 14% of the population to 12% of the population in less than 10 years.
But check
and
this out.
Hispanics have done the opposite. They've increased by 6% over the last 10 years.
So I'm a demographer, and I've been studying this. My thesis was on Black and brown power building at Harvard to use the Voting Rights Act to create Black-brown districts under Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, right? Which you can't do because they make you, under the prior Supreme Court legislation, it was by definition only. You could not use both groups together to make a claim for protection, okay? We've been knowing what's going to happen with the Hispanic population since the 1965 Immigration Act was passed. And it was passed specifically to undermine Black political power. Let me be clear. 1964, we get a Civil Rights Act. We get another version in 1965. We get the Voting Rights Act in 1965. What I try to educate our people about is the following. We are emotional people, but we need to be fact-based and move with ration. So 3/5, we were written into the Constitution as 3/5 of a human being. It really wasn't 3/5 of a human being. What they were doing was they were doing some shuckery and muckery with the way we take census for the division of political power, because under the Constitution, we take the census to disperse billions of dollars in federal funding based on population, right? Roads, schools, Head Start, et cetera, But the bigger thing is next year across this country, we will redistrict all of the political boundaries based on the census. And so during the fight around slavery, because the South was so heavily black slaves outnumbered white people. The people in the North didn't give two fronts about us. It was about the fact that they had guns and the South had labor, and the political compromise of us as commodities was to count us as 3/5 so that there would be more equity between the North and the South. Okay? Fine. So when we passed the Voting Rights Act in 1965, and even after Reconstruction, black folks did well politically, in education. We had black Congress people, right? Back in the 1800s, Reconstruction. But when we saw the growth of that, we started to do things like Jim Crow. And so to come out of Jim Crow, we do the 1965, all this stuff. But I asked this when I took over as the head of the ACLU here in the state, the folks who led and wrote those laws. And here's what they said: white people, Jewish people in alignment with others within the ACLU. They didn't write those laws black and white. They wrote them what? Majority, minority. Why? Because they knew this was a population thing from the start. They knew it was a population thing from the start. So when we moved our immigration policy in 1965 to be family reunification, it was really to drown out and to create this infighting between poor blacks, not poor blacks, poor whites, blacks, and Hispanics about whose jobs are being taken. We started that between black and white folk before there was a large Hispanic population. So Hispanic population's been growing. We've been knowing it. In 2024, they will outnumber us in the larger electorate.
Yeah.
It all depends on whether people turn out to vote. But here's what I'll say. I'm unbothered by that in the following. We aren't reproducing at the same rates.
Right.
The immigration policy.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So why does the population of become what defines whether or not we should move forward, or whether or not who can speak or who can lead? That was basically my idea.
I'll tell you, because in a state like Georgia, we're 31%, and we can control here.
Here,
as black folks, which matters, but it's not just here, right? The fight on redistricting that's going to happen in January, I can already tell you what the Republicans plan to do on the congressional boundaries here in the state. As an example, in congressional districts 7 and 12, they're going to pack the black people into congressional district 5 to make it more blacker, but to dilute the black influence in these other congressional districts where our populations are growing, right? If we were organized 4 years ago, we would have been advocating for independent redistricting commissions, which I wrote an op-ed and support a report in favor of. And we as black folks would have been hedging our bets with our black legislators in the Georgia Legislative Caucus. And here's why. Because over the last 6 years, when I talked to members of that body, Georgia has the largest black legislative caucus of any state legislature in America. And I go to them individually and I say, hey guys, what are we going to do? 4 years ago, let's get a plan on redistricting. Why? My seat is fine. Right? So it's not about the voter.
Yeah,
See,
I understand that.
the vote calculus is on the voter. Now, here's why it matters. I don't see our numbers as being inconsequential as black people, right? And so it does matter because of that. And again, when I said what I said about whether or not the policy agenda leads with what's in the best interest of trans people, which is a relatively small population, or do we lead with what everybody needs, right? Because those same trans people who may have very specific needs for the subgroup, right? They still need housing. They still need health care. They still need the same things. And I've always said that, right? When I say these things, I'm not saying at the expense of their issues. I'm saying we universally got issues we got to deal with. And then we can take each of the insular things. What I need as a mother, what you need as a woman.
So basically what you're saying is we need to stop being byproducts of stuff and be the leading and let other people be byproducts of this legislation.
So what about like the HBCU funding?
What
for
about
example, like increasing HBCU funding?
I find
is that race specific enough?
I find that very interesting. That all of a sudden, HBCUs are at forefront of all these different people who never gave two craps about it. I
meant Obama's. Like, is that an example of a race specific enough?
It's not, because here's one of the problems. I think HBCUs absolutely need funding, right? But is it race specific enough? You're talking to somebody who didn't go to a HBCU, so that shit don't cover me.
Me either. I didn't go
Right?
either.
But
So, no. So
I
what
mean, the
I'm saying to you,
beneficiaries.
no. What I'm saying to you is, because here's the problem with that, right? It gets back to the numbers. This fight happens a lot, and it's a bad fight. Again, this is why I don't like the infighting of us as black people, right? It becomes divisive. In our family, we have the battle of the real HUs, because I went to Harvard and my sister went to Howard, right? But here's the problem. I had people run up on me and say, you don't know this and you don't have that because you went to a PWI and their experience is this, that, and the third.
Yeah,
Well, first of all,
I
you
get
didn't go
that.
to a PWI. But here's the other thing. At some of these HBCUs, there ain't nothing but 5,000 people. At some of these PWIs, it might be 15 or 20,000 of us among a population. So what are we really saying? And so numerically, are we really doing the entire group a benefit if we say it's solely the benefit? Because, see, I'd much rather do this. I'd much rather HBCUs get the funding that they need to be competitive at the same time that there is a dedicated earmark to black families and their progeny as part of a reparations package that I wouldn't call reparations, because I don't even like the term reparations. I call it back pay. You know why? No, don't laugh. Don't laugh.
No, I know why. I know why.
We got to start changing narratives.
I mean, changing narratives, sure, but the definition is exactly that. That
No,
is what a
it's
reparation
not. It's
is.
not
It is
exactly
money
the
that
same.
was owed that was never paid.
So,
That's
so
what
let
a
me be
reparation
clear.
By
is.
definition.
Let me be clear. So right now we're having a conversation about affordable housing. That's not about affordable housing. You know why? Because the term affordable housing makes you think projects and Pookie and them. And people don't want that no more. Not even black homeowners in affluent areas don't want affordable housing. But if you call it workforce housing, that means, because affordable means lazy. You're not going to work, which is not truthful.
Connotation.
Not truthful. It matters.
Connotation-wise.
It matters because when you say workforce housing, they're willing to give the beneficiaries to young millennial white folks who need a little bit of support, but they had 80% the AMI, which is $80,000, but the neighborhood that they're building in may only have an average income of $20,000. So by definition, it's an inherent displacement strategy. But black folks and white folks get behind the term
That is true.
workforce housing
That is true.
in ways that the same people will say, I don't want affordable housing, when in fact they may in fact be the same thing. So I'm not in disagreement that some of the policies that may come from back pay are in fact the very policies that we need from reparations. I just think that when I hear people talk about reparations, I hear black folks say, well, you don't need that because you know them folks ain't going to do nothing with that money no way. Look, we'll kill ourselves before we even get going. So I'm just simply suggesting that we need to reframe our own narratives about our things that we want to see accomplished and to do them in ways where we can build coalitions who support us. If ever black people had a moment in time where we could benefit from white allies who are open to doing things differently, now is that time. We just all over the place. Black Lives Matter has become the banner under which people talk about it. Now we all get behind the slogan, but what they do and what they mean, I don't know that I'm aligned.
I'm certainly not. I'm certainly not.
agenda.
But so here's my issue with not even the narrative, but the sentiment that I feel like constantly builds every time we talk about how much we don't like Biden or how much we don't like this or that. It's because the only answer to getting people out of office, I mean, there's many answers to this, and the term limits, I think, is one of those answers. But the reason why people who are currently sitting in those seats are not invested is because they feel they don't individually need to be. However, if that's going to change, then people have to run. So why isn't the idea to get more and more people to run, to get more women runs who are not, that are based on color rather than race, or to get...
I think there is, and here's the problem with it, though. As a candidate who availed herself,
How about you can speak to that?
The establishment lies. They don't want the things that you're talking about, right? Because examples, establishment would not include me in any political debates. How's that possible if Democrats are the party of inclusion? Whether you agree with me or not, right? I don't want your money, but you just don't even include the people, right? Now, that's not unique to me. You had Amanda Edwards run in Texas. You had another woman run, I believe, in Minnesota, black women. Do you think the establishment supported any black female candidates for United States Senate? Zilch, zero, nada, right? And in North Carolina, where Cal Cunningham, the Democrats, a fair weather, mediocre white man, because we got a lot of mediocre white men Democrats running right now all over the country. Okay, and the establishment will get behind them and then say, well, you guys should run. But what am I supposed to do? Mortgage my house, right? I know on good authority someone who's just made history as a black woman political success story. I'd like to keep her anonymous. You know, She says, the first time I ran, I lost, but I took a huge personal financial hit. And people have come to me and say, run again, but how can I run again if I don't have capital behind me to actually do it? Or I have people who say, we are the backbone of the party, the moral consciousness, but the party don't put no money behind black folks.
Right.
Or what about this? Biden got $370 million to spend on his campaign. I bet you less than 2% of that went to black consultants. When the DSCC sent me consultants, they was all lily white. And I said, so you think in black-ass Georgia, in a black-ass primary, I'm going to be running around the state like this? Now, I don't mind diversity and inclusion, but you ain't got nobody black on the bill. Nobody. So I got a lot to say about that because why don't people just run? Why don't people just run?
No, I know why people don't just
run.
I'm
not talking about you. I'm just saying for our viewers, it's like...
I mean, it's prohibited, period, in the first place. But quite frankly, and even if you win, it can be, which I'm glad we get to see at the federal level with Ocasio-Cortez.
Yeah.
I'm glad we get to see that and get to see people, mock her for not moving to D.C. immediately, like that's a cheap thing to do.
Yeah.
However, what I guess I am talking about is the solution-based approach to the problems that do currently exist. And even if it has everything to do with rolling back what we were able to do as far as election financing in the first place at the federal level, I don't know if it has something to do with the destruction of the two-party system, which would make me very happy, period.
Me too.
But those, I think, are more inspiring or at least more proactive than what I do see happening when we do have people come through here who are between 18 and 20 constantly. And when they're polled, for however accurate that polling data is, which is that they just do not care, they just choose not to care. It's the default response because there seems to be too much corruption and not enough answers and not enough fixes and a whole bunch of griping about the problem and not enough solutions for the problem. So people just emotionally disengage from the entire process.
Why should they?
Because
this is
for all the reasons that you're talking about. Because black people do deserve certain things because things have been worked for, things should be earned, wealth should be built, which means that things have to be done, and sitting back is not going to ensure that those things get done.
And doing things is not going to ensure they get done either.
But what about everything you just talked about?
Let me be very clear. I've been in the game a very long time.
I understand.
Okay? I was in the room when Kamala pitched her first campaign for DA. So there are a lot of deals being cut a long time ago. The problem that I have, and this is why I love millennials, right? I love my daughter who says, so you want me to vote? Why? Let me get this right. Let me even start with my 13-year-old who last night we're driving home and there's a viral video of folks in rural Georgia, two white men, groups of white people, but two white men in particular over 50 who are battling over signs. There's a Biden sign and a Trump sign, these two white guys. And baby girl says, so we got the Crips and the Bloods banging? This is my 13-year-old. This is what we've modeled to our children is democracy. And then we tell people, participate because it matters. Does it really? People went out and voted in 2016. The general vote went to one candidate, but the Electoral College went to another because it's an oligarch, private institution of one percenters, whether they Republicans or Democrats. The system is simply not set up for the kind of solutions that you and I are talking about or that many of us have been working on for the last 20 years. I don't get to this point not having been in that mindset early in my career. I'm just at a different point because I am so practical.
But so here's my question, though, because the proactive approach to me would be then Pan-Africanism or a new version of that, which is just a black exodus, which is just you just leave. That makes a lot more sense to me. That's a respectable position to me. In the same way that, like, for religious example, atheism is a respectable position to me. I don't agree with it, but it's a respectable position to me. Agnosticism isn't. Confusion or I don't know, that doesn't make any sense. I can't respect that idea. I can't respect that if there is an immortal soul and you could suffer forever, you're just going to kind of wait and see. It makes more sense to me that someone has decided that there isn't one. And so to me, to leave a system that you believe is fundamentally irreparable makes a lot of sense.
Well, okay, so here's my thing.
Does not make sense.
The conversation we had with Shelton, I thought about that and I'm still thinking about that for a week. And I was really bothered by the example he used where he was saying there was, he said 8 to 16 different cases. Each case, presentations of candidates had a African-American in each one of them. And out of, I think it was like 8 to 18, he said they kept choosing the white guy.
Yep.
And he was like, he was facilitating, or I think he said he got the call, and he was like, so how do we have this many cases with all this variety in it, and you continuously pick? And he gave one example. He talked about the lady that was like it wasn't neurology, but it was something on that caliber.
I think she was an engineer.
I think she was an engineer, and she'd been in it for years, and she was in the military, and she had gotten to the top of it, like a master thing. And it was like, how do you bypass her in all these cases and still go with the white
Somebody
candidate?
who went to the UGA, I think.
Yeah, and then he was talking about Spelman versus Georgia Tech, and I think that her degree had come from Spelman, and I think it was a different room. But he was saying that they had these two candidates that came down to a black woman and a white guy, and the white guy that was facilitating was like, well, I want to go with the white guy because he went to Georgia Tech, and somebody raised their hand and was like, yeah, but you do realize that Spelman does a cross program with Georgia Tech. Her degree just says Spelman.
Yeah.
The problem is we're still not in these rooms. And so we're back to square one to me. How do we get in these rooms?
No, because even when we're in the rooms, I've been in the rooms, right? And I've watched the establishment be like, so put a muzzle on her because we don't like what she's saying.
Yeah,
you don't want to hear what I'm saying because it's not part of the party line. And so I don't 100% agree, but I do understand. And so I don't know that Exodus is the only option in a system like this, right? I'm assessing for myself what meaningful participation really does look like, quite frankly. But I will say this. As Black people, particularly the descendants of American slaves who don't have a connection to a motherland or banking system like all voluntary immigrants to this country do, we're in a precarious situation because many people can exit back to where their generational families come from.
Sure
That's
can.
We don't
Yeah.
have that option necessarily, but I am in favor of multilingualism for Black people and multi-citizenship for Black people. I think that many of us should be exploring how we take advantage of the Year of Reclamation in Ghana, where they are giving descendants of slaves across the globe citizenship there. I was on a recent plane to Miami, and a white woman sat next to me, told me her husband was German. But Germany has a rule that the children and grandchildren can get citizenship where the spouse cannot necessarily. So her children have German citizenship. They leverage it and go back to Germany at least once a year, and they are maximizing it to their benefit, okay? So I do think that there are things that we should do. I know of groups of folks who are, having an exodus back to Africa or
and
the
I've seen
Medellin
all
or
these
the
headlines
other
about it.
places. I mean, that's how Liberia was created. American Blacks created the country of Liberia and Africa. So, but let me tell you why we should know more about Africa. Africa has the youngest population in the world. Their buying power is estimated at $3 trillion. If hip-hop is a dying breed with Afro beats, and if you ain't listening to Beyonce and Rihanna, they all going Afrobeat-ish because it's the new wave. Not only that, there's so many business opportunities that we can do as Black people there. The Chinese are the new colonialists there. You got more and more Chinese, Nigerian babies all across, and they are making infrastructure investments like we ain't never seen. So I'm just a globalist in the way that I think about my Blackness, even though I'm American Black and I want to protect that and the legacy of what that means. I can tell you for me, I'm not giving up none of my property rights in America because they are the blood, sweat, and tears of my ancestors. I do want the flexibility to, if it ever got to the place that I need to say I'm out, that I have created the infrastructure to do that. I am concerned about what our political establishment and landscape looks like. And quite frankly, depending on the outcome of this election, I'm not convinced that we're not on the brink of some version of a civil war, okay? We had a civil war. We just didn't rewrite our Constitution when we did it. We made some concessions and agreements between the North and the South that didn't benefit us, period.
Okay, so freeze there, because after y'all two had y'all talk the last time we were all together, y'all talk, I actually thought about that. So my question was, if we have this civil war, because I think we're amendment it out. I don't think there's anything else, no more band-aids you can put in the Constitution to try to make it inclusionary to everybody. We're amendment it out. It's just not going to work. Because all you're going to do is give it to us and water it down over the next couple of years. So let's just stop doing that. But after the Civil War, who rewrites the Constitution? Like, who's going to rewrite it? If we're going to put another group of white boys there to rewrite it, aren't we just going backwards? Who's going to rewrite it?
Are we going to put a whole
Well, I mean, we wouldn't want that to happen, but if we're already having issues in rooms and things of that magnitude, that's going to be kind of the same room to rewrite the Constitution. So how we gonna do that? Like,
well, let me give an example because Chile's rewriting theirs right now. It just was announced in the last 36, 48, 72 hours, right? I mean, it happens, right? I've advised the Ukraine on the reconstruction of their judiciary after their civil war, and they had to rewrite their constitution. You figure it out. The thing for me is, do you want the system you have today? Or are you willing to have a leap of faith of something better? And that's really the choice. You gonna figure out how to operate in this system, imperfect as it is, in the way that was just described, or you figure out a different system.
Yeah, but who decides it? That becomes the question.
But is it any different than there were a lot of people who said that the Affordable Care Act could not happen because there had been prior iterations under the Clintons and other folks to get things done? I mean, here's what I do think, okay? I don't think there's a panacea, one, or like static nature of how these things happen, right? There are things that we control, there are things that happen beyond our control, like a pandemic. Now, there's some people who think it was not by accident, but that's not really my thing. I only say it because there's so much unknown to us, right? There's so much that transpires, transforms, that I believe we have the capacity to figure out a different system. I truly and fundamentally believe that. And I don't think, because this gets back to reparations, right? Mm-hmm. One of the reasons people, particularly black people, won't sign on because they say, well, how do you get it done? It's not, we won't even believe that it's possible unless you write it out in a whole whatever. But let me tell you, other groups, they say, this is what we want, and we're going to figure out how to get there. And we're willing to do the incremental steps to get there. We as black folks, like privileged, and I'm saying this, black woman saying it. I feel like we as black people have been sold a bill of goods in whatever's happened in the last 50 years that we want it spelled out for us. We don't believe in deferred gratification, nothing. We aren't willing to put in the long term. We want it right now. If it don't come right now, and this is why I think Trump's gonna get 20% of the black male vote, because, you know, even loved ones within my family who are entrepreneurs, barbers, truckers, they credit Trump with getting them back to work. They credit Trump with saving their
Trump
business.
Checks.
They credit Trump with the check.
Yeah,
okay.
I hate
now,
when you say that.
Even though that was not a black check.
Listen.
That was just a check. There was no color on that check.
But guess what? Obama ain't sent no checks in the 2008 mortgage meltdown. Banks got checks. So I'm not. I can't do all that. Because if you can get a bank a check, you can give me a check too. I'm a taxpayer. Why would you give my money to a corporation?
But this
and
is
not
the first and
me?
only. First of all, I believe Barack Obama would have done the same thing, if not more, than what we saw President Trump do.
Will never know.
We won't. However, the only thing that Trump has done prior to this had to do with his tax bill, and that went straight to businesses. That had nothing to do with individuals either.
Yeah, I don't credit him with doing a check. It just happened to be in his administration.
This is a fluke situation. That would not be fair to credit Trump for.
But is it a fluke situation to then credit Obama with getting us out of the mortgage, to the 2008 mortgage? I mean, see, this is the problem for me when we pick and choose where we giving folks credit, right? Here's the deal. I hear a lot of people say, we can't hold Biden accountable for the 1994 crime bill. That was done collectively through the blah, 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 blah. Right?
I'm not saying we
but
can't
then on
hold
the same time, then people say, well, we got to hold this guy in office accountable for everything when there are actors on both sides engaged. So either we holding folks fully accountable or they part of a larger process, but we not picking and choosing based on who's aligned with our outcome.
But I'm just talking about timing, like the decision whether or not to retaliate against. That was just a timing decision. I can't say that Barack Obama wouldn't have done what George Bush did because he didn't have. It was just. But I also wouldn't say that President George Bush is responsible for some of the best national security laws we've ever had, because they were the product of a situation that I choose to believe it just happened. Timing just happened. I don't believe that they would have been there otherwise.
But isn't that true for everybody?
Well, exactly, which is why I wouldn't pat President Trump on the back for it, because it's true for everybody. I don't think that's the.
But then ask yourself this question: if you do a juxtaposition, right? Global pandemic put us in an economic recession. 2008 mortgage meltdown based on derivatives from Wall Street put us into a recession. One policy response was to bail out banks. One policy response was banks and people.
I mean, so
then
fair.
what?
It's fair.
It's a check. I got a check in this one. I didn't get a check in this one. Regardless
I know
of
you gotta hate us out. I was like,
listen.
I'm
It would make me incredibly happy. It would make me very happy if a check is all that would be necessary to quiet this entire like frustration with the system. I would be so happy for it. My only political argument with reparation is that I don't believe it will be enough. I just don't believe people are satisfied, period. I believe that they want to redo the last 500 years, and that is cataclysmically impossible. That's my only issue with it. So I just don't believe it will be enough.
Which people? Black people?
Us, them, everybody. I just don't believe it will ever be enough, because I don't believe if I give you $20,000 today, that all your problems will be solved.
So you do nothing.
So I wait. Because until I know that until I know that stomach can be fed, I'm not cooking a meal for you, because I'm not going to empty my fridge. No. So until I know that you are willing to be satisfied, I'm not cooking up anything.
My only fear, okay,
but I'm just not doing it. So what I was going to get back to as far as the selection is concerned, and only as far as the selection is concerned, I do believe that there's something to be said about an entire group and an entire body. I think that's important. I'm not saying that President Trump deserves absolutely. I'm not. Well, no, I can't.
And listen, I'm not. Wait, time out.
I'm not saying he doesn't make any decisions. I'm not saying he doesn't make any decisions.
But this is where I have to challenge anybody who is not authentic in the assessment because they don't like who the person or thing is. Right? This is not about Trump for me. What I think about Trump is irrelevant. I'm taking the assessment that you provided that it doesn't matter, it's timing. So if it's timing, under this administration I got a check, under this one I didn't.
Yeah.
This ain't about giving nobody credit.
Yeah. My criticism is about the substance of the check, period. That's my criticism. It's about the substance of $1,000 given everything else you have going on in your life or don't. That's my
but that's
criticism.
not the check that people talking about, though. Ain't nobody talking about this $1,200 check. Some people are. I'm talking about the $20,000 that went into people's account for their businesses, right? If you qualified for the small business loan, you got $20,000. And do you know how many people went like this? And it was like $20,000 in my check.
Not a lot of people under my,
yes,
as far as I
people.
understood, because we didn't claim a lot of what we would have otherwise been entitled to.
Yeah, there was a lot of money left in that.
No. But let me be clear. I hear that. I think there's always issues in terms of getting the maximum, but more people than not got some piece of this pie. And it was interesting to see, and this is from somebody who I'm not out here trying to. I see Biden and Trump as the same. To be completely honest with you, right? They're the same. They're the same individual to me. They are men of privilege. They are people who have an influence, and they are people who now are vying to be the leader of this nation. But materially, my outcome as a black person ain't gonna be changed whoever's in office, right? And this is where I wish we would take a step back. We've been emotional about what this person says, right?
Well, because for me, policy-wise, there probably isn't going to be a big impact for me. But
saying.
Principally, I do care because the side effect of who that person is and how they purport themselves, independent of whether or not he hurts my feelings, it impacts the fact that when I walk into a grocery store and I'm right behind somebody, I get an elbow.
Oh no,
because there's somebody who's a Trump.
See,
Yeah, it absolutely does.
Those are the lies to me.
No, they're not lies because there's definite proof of racist experiences and hate crimes being impacted upon people far higher numbers than they were under any previous administration in like modern history, like since the civil rights era.
See, but that's good. I love.
And I don't care if they're microaggressions or macroaggressions.
I love when people use things like modern history, right?
Yeah, I'm saying modern history
start?
Civil rights. That's what I'm saying. 68, 69,
the massacre
70.
that happened in Orlando was the worst massacre that happened in modern history, and the race is black history. And that's one of the reasons I don't like using that term for me as a principle. But I will say this. That narrative is very much aligned with the white progressive.
But I don't even need the narrative. It's my own daily experience of white people who fuck with me now versus 10 years ago or 5 years ago.
Let me say this.
It's increasingly higher.
Let me say this.
Even if Trump doesn't bother me at all. I'm more concerned about people. In fact, I'm not concerned about people like Donald Trump.
But this is what I do think is happening. So let me make it less personal and just talk about what I'm hearing people of similar sentiment communicate. I don't watch the dumb box very much because I think it does something to the psyche to make us feel certain things, okay? I also think that if you think that Biden don't think or say some of the stuff this dude says just not when the mic is hot, or Hillary too, I think we lying to ourselves, right?
I agree.
Because see, I think I know what we say when we in the privacy of our
But when
own
we not on
home.
mics.
I agree.
understand
When
what
we
I'm
not
saying?
mics.
So for me, I'm like, that this man steps up, and every time you ask Biden a black question and this dude ain't on script, he fucks that question up because he
That's
don't
fair.
got no good black nothing.
That's fair.
Okay? So the fact that he didn't call me an N or a shit country don't make me feel no different than this man who do, because I don't give a shit what either
But
one of them
it's,
say.
and again, individually, their impact on people like Stephen Taylor, their impact on people
But
to
this is the
organize and to
problem.
decide, well, we'll be physical with what we believe he verbally said. That's what bothers me.
But that's not about him. That's about the internet, as far as I'm concerned, right?
Well,
because
either
we now
way.
have these vehicles that kind of promote these sentiments that are emotional.
I agree.
Right? For me, I'm not bothered by any of it because what was more problematic to me was the people on the other side who said this stuff ain't happening no way. These were the white progressives that supported Obama, said we was in post-racial society. Once you got him elected, all the white folks came out before Trump. But sis, hear me. Before Trump ever got elected, this sentiment among white folks was already festering.
That's
he just
true.
exploited it to his benefit.
Yeah.
So why am
And to
I
my
saying-
detriment. And to
no,
my detriment.
No, it
Because
was already your detriment, but we
it
couldn't
was-
see it because we
I
packaged
couldn't
it up.
feel it. I couldn't feel the
And
fist
that's
in my
the
face.
problem.
I don't want to feel it.
No.
And no,
You
I
maybe
really
didn't,
don't.
but I felt it here, and here. So it ain't no different for me,
Well,
right? And this was my problem. When the white progressives came out here and said, we're in a post-racial society, what are you black people mad about? These were progressives.
Yeah.
The people that think they're your friends when you on the blue side.
Conservatives
saying,
still say it.
And then what about my sis Nina Turner when she went to work for Bernie, and then the white progressives came to her and got at her in ways that were more aggressive than the damn conservatives. Let me tell you this. On every day, all these white folks got the capacity to put an elbow in
Of
our
course
back.
they do.
So I ain't worried
But
about
there's some
nothing
that
Trump.
do, and there's some that are not.
I'm not
That's
worried
my
about
concern.
Trump because I felt like this generation needed to see it out loud because we was over here in pockets with our white fans giving them passes
That
somehow they
sounds
was
good.
sitting at the table with us. Hey, black friend, we're all in this together.
I don't
black
care
friend.
if it's fake or if it's real, as long as it can't hurt me. I
But
do
it
not
all
care.
hurts us,
It
is what
doesn't.
I'm
not-
saying.
Okay,
not-
ladies.
It all
Okay, ladies.
hurts us.
We're at
Not
the
for me.
we're at the 4 o'clock mark. So as much as I love this, we got to wrap it up. We're at the 4 o'clock mark. This is a nice clip I get to use when I do the social. This is a nice clip I get to use. So in any event,
It's all spirited banter.
It
which
is.
I love.
It
I mean,
is
I
all
actually it's
spirited banter,
this
and I
is
think
this
it's
is-
necessary for.
this is what the leadership blend is about. Like, I want to be able to have these kinds of high thing conversations. I actually enjoyed it both, and I didn't have to say much. So just looking at you two like
We
this,
didn't even get back
like
to-
I'm in a referee thing. So
And I'm gonna have to run, but I think the amendments are important. So if I could mention one before you
Yeah.
sign off,
Yeah.
it is the sovereign immunity one. I really believe that people need to understand what the sovereign immunity means. As a constitutionalist, as the head of the ACLU, we took on a case where people said we were defending the KKK, and it wasn't really that. There was a free speech component, but the more important one was sovereign immunity. Sovereign immunity basically protects government from being sued unless they agree to be sued. Okay? Sovereign immunity is also what is used to protect police officers and officer-involved killings. It's one of the reasons they have not been able to go to jail is sovereign immunity. So there's an amendment that will waive sovereign immunity, which gives each of us the right to sue government should they
Right.
violate our rights. This is a yes to on this notion of waiving sovereign immunity.
But to be clear, this is civil liability. So it
It
doesn't.
is.
Okay.
And what she means by that is by civil liability, it is in non-criminal activity. So this is not waiving the sovereign immunity that will protect folks in police-involved shootings, but it is a step in the right direction to move the needle on that dial.
And Libertarian candidate for president Justin Amash did have a federal waiver for that. But anyway, nobody wants to vote.
That was
Libertarian,
actually what we were supposed to be doing. What you just did right there. That's what we were supposed to be doing. But you
That's what I said,
two,
we never got
you
back
two
to
couldn't
it.
even
I
agree
didn't
for us to
realize
get
we
down.
had close on time. We need a time taker.
It's fine. All right. So in any event, I'm gonna have to figure out
Next
some way to continue this because
Yes.
we're gonna figure out some way to
We
continue
should
this.
just do a Zoom something or other. That
We're gonna
I know
do
you don't
something
like.
like-
I know you don't. That's not.
I mean, we've done it. I just, I like
know.
everybody likes studio.
The
It's fun
energy,
being in the
yeah,
studio and
yeah.
stuff. So I digress. All right, we're gonna figure out something with Maya because I just love it. So in any event, we want you to vote on November the 3rd.
Absolutely.
We're gonna try to do something in between November the 3rd to really do what we were supposed to do today. To really get you informed about what's really on the ballots and what's important. But I'm glad she threw that out there. So, but in any event, we will see you guys. Check for a flyer or something. If not, we'll see you guys on next Friday, same time, same place on
Thanks
Leadership
for
Living with your
having
host,
me, y'all.
Ricardo D. Rice.